Homeless in California, a tough and a challenging epidemic yet to be solved. And when we talk about homelessness in the Golden State, the first cities or communities mentioned are Los Angeles and the Bay Area. And for the obvious reason, there are tens of thousands of people, respectively, living on the concrete every day in these two places. Yet often not talked about is the homeless crisis in Orange County, California. This once suburban community, home to Disneyland, Angels baseball, and soccer moms, is now a massive urban metropolitan county with over 3 million people. A county also now dealing with its own homeless dilemma. The question is, can Orange County, unlike LA or the Bay Area, solve their situation? And that is where we begin our broadcast.
It is comprehensive, and it's a collaborative, and it's a bunch of cities in North Orange County, a bunch of nonprofits, a bunch of resources that work together in the region to help the homeless, to help people transition back into the community that are getting out of jail, and to help kids to stay out of gang violence and not get involved in family violence, all so they can have a successful path in life.
Buena Park Police Chief Corey Sainez is talking about the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative, which in part is a program to battle back against homelessness in Orange County, California. Throughout OC, there are thousands of homeless people of all ages living on the streets in cities like Santa Ana, Anaheim, Fullerton, Buena Park, Stanton, Newport Beach, and Laguna Beach. Lack of affordable housing, the high cost of living, and the hot weather are just some of the reasons for this. Adding to the homeless problem in California, critics say, is a lack of political conviction, with the local and state leaders who keep promising to fix the homeless problem, yet never keep those promises. Chief Corey Sainez says that dynamic has been changing recently here in the OC, and this all began with a $20 million grant a few years ago that helped launch the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative.
How are we going to do a better job? Because we did it all individually before. How are we going to work together and do a better job in making sure that we're providing the right services and identifying what we need as a group versus individually? And we did it. And it's 5 years in the making now.
Chief Sainez says part of the $20 million grant is going to fund the new Hope Center, a ground zero command center of sorts here in Orange County to bring all homeless resources together. HOPE is an acronym for Homeless Outreach Proactive Engagement.
It's a location not to where the people come, but to where the resources work together. So like our homeless liaison officers, our outreach workers, we're right next to a hospital here. We'll have some medical staff on board, our mental health workers from the county, some of our nonprofits that do work with the homeless will be here at this location, working together, sharing information. We have an application, a data application that we use to be able to keep track of people by name that need our services, what services they need. It all can be shared with them on a regular basis in the mornings before they go out in the county and do their thing.
Chief Sainez explains the primary goal of HOPE and the collaborative is to get the homeless away from their concrete zip code and relocate them to a place of housing and healing, something that in years past Orange County did not have a good track record of doing.
This is all about real-time information and sharing information. It's something that we didn't do a good job at in the county, and that was one of our efforts. And we've kind of finally gotten there, and so that everybody can work together, address the issues. For example, if Corey Sainez was homeless and I was in Buena Park last night, now I'm in Fullerton today, what were we doing with you? Where can we pick up? Where can we get you into a house? Where can we get you to the services you need, so that next person that stops Corey Sainez will know, okay, this is where we ended up with you. Now let's finish doing what we were doing. And before we weren't doing that, so we never really knew.
Chief Sainez explains that new technology is advancing the process of keeping track of the homeless and getting them help. The tech is known as the Outreach Grid. A nonprofit company in Northern California created the grid.
It got a little frustrating. And now we have this data application on our phones that we can pull up by name and see where we were in the process, what services you have already been provided, and how can we help you today. And it's taking those next steps to get that individual into those services that they need. We needed some kind of database some kind of application that we could all share. We could identify an individual, their needs, the resources, all that kind of stuff. We first started using it when we did a census of our homeless back in 2018, I believe it was, 2017, 2018. And so we started a by name database that we were able to track people. And at that time, I think we were able to get 1,375 names of individuals that were on the street. And so since that time, we've tracked those 1,300 people and been able to say where they've gone, have they gotten out of homelessness? And I think 680 of them have gotten out of homelessness now.
Tiffany Pang is the Outreach Grid co-founder and CEO.
Outreach Grid is a software platform available on iOS, Android mobile web that allows agencies, service providers to collaborate together on homelessness information from first contact to housing. And how it began is near and dear to my heart. I was born and raised in San Francisco. San Francisco 20 odd years ago looks very different from what it is today. I was raised in a single parent family household. It was just my mom and my younger sister and myself. My mom was an immigrant from Hong Kong, and 20 odd years ago, she could navigate San Francisco and figure out how to live and support herself and support us. I didn't really appreciate this until after I graduated high school and went off to college in the East Coast and then came back into San Francisco as an adult, how much things has changed. And if my mom had come to America today, it would be very difficult for her to navigate it. Increasing cost of living, increasing rent, and anytime that happens in a city, you start having people fall through the cracks.
20 years ago, much of OC was a quiet suburban community, a community where people could escape the madness of living in Los Angeles and live about an hour away in neighborhoods that were not dealing with the same challenges of LA and the Bay Area: homelessness, crime, cops. However, these days, OC is dealing with all of this. Knowing that, Tiffany took her tech engineering background and her app to Orange County, believing her outreach grid could be a part of the homeless solution here.
We're able to do matching a lot better. We can understand someone's needs and what is available a lot better, as opposed to me calling you, a shelter provider, and say, hey, do you have a bed available, and do you have one that is available that can accommodate for pets? Those kinds of things are handled in the app. That kind of logic is handled in the app. You don't have to rely on getting someone on the phone. It happens with a notification. It notifies the shelter, they respond to it, and there's this happy, virtuous cycle that happens between the outreach worker and the shelter operator, where as the outreach worker, I'm getting a response and I know what to do next with my client. I'm not waiting with them an hour or two to get a response. I can quickly get a response with this client, move on to the next client, and so on and so forth. One of the challenges was, how do we understand encampments in our city? How do we understand how they're evolving, whether they're still active or inactive, are they still occupied by individuals, and what services have been dispensed to them? That's something that service providers didn't know.
Fullerton Police Chief Robert Dunn is also involved with the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative. Chief Dunn admits prior to the collaborative, cities like Fullerton and Buena Park did not have much success with the homeless. In fact, critics often accused Orange County law enforcement and OC municipalities of worsening the homeless problem, in part with cops trying to deal with the homeless population on their own, the criminalization, the lack of services, the lack of communication.
In a siloed way, we looked at it within the borders of our cities. We responded, and I think what we've realized through this collaborative is that when we respond, so if Fullerton took an effort 5 years ago, we would push those who are experiencing homelessness to all the other cities around us, and then they would plan something, and they would engage, and they would push them back to Fullerton. And so basically, we weren't gaining any ground, we were just moving the problem around the county. And what the collaborative did was bring everybody together and say, man, we've been doing it wrong.
Wrong in the sense that OC police departments were fending for themselves, so to speak, trying to combat homelessness. Like Fullerton, cities were basically relocating the homeless out of their backyard, so homeless people were someone else's problem. Temporary fix? Possibly. Bad idea? Definitely. Another problem was that taxpayer money was being spent, or in many cases, wasted. Now, as part of the collaborative, there is more accountability and oversight. Chief Dunn partners with other chiefs like Corey Sainez, as well as homeless shelters, nonprofits, mental health services, where all these agencies work together in a laser-focused, coordinated approach instead of haphazardly going it alone.
The outcomes are better. And so I think that really is what's changed for us, is that kind of collaborative effort, looking at it more regionally than specific in our silo, and then bringing the right stakeholders to the table to get the best outcomes. So I think first and foremost, what makes us different is that we're testing the efficacy. We're not afraid of the data. And so by starting out with our partners at Outreach Grid, for example, and from the very onset of this collaborative, we were able to start gathering data so we can see that when we're out there and engaging and we're providing those resources or offering the resources, where are they falling out? Where are people not being successful in the continuum of care, if you will? And so now we can take that data and say, okay, we have monies that we're putting into these 3 areas, but this one isn't working very well. So we're constantly trying to better the programs that we're doing, being good stewards of the public funds, of course, because that's our responsibility.
Daniel Smart got help from the collaborative. Daniel is a Navy veteran and a Southern California native. When his Navy days were over in the early 80s, he was lost. No job, no money, nowhere to live.
No hope, hopeless, not care. Because once you're out there in that cold world on the streets, you lose compassion real quick. So you don't even care what you're gonna do to anybody else. Nobody matters but you. And it just spirals down.
Over his adult life, with no money and no employment, Daniel had to take shelter from anyone who was offering. His mom, his girlfriend, a local church. However, just recently, Daniel finally found permanent housing. Heroes Landing, where Daniel now lives, is a 75-unit apartment building in Santa Ana, specifically designed to provide housing and resources for homeless vets. The North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative partners with a nonprofit, Jamboree Housing, which helped build Heroes Landing. Daniel says the collaborative treated him with kindness and compassion, something often missing, he says, when dealing with the homeless.
Don't you see where you're at? Can't you see how dirty and filthy it is that your area that you're living in? Without picking on them, that they would just be like human beings instead of like animals. The way about doing that is, I know throwing a lot of money around, it doesn't do a whole bunch. There's got to be some heart in it, and professionalism and patience.
Damian Fonseca is an outreach coordinator here in North Orange County. As a social service worker and field liaison, he helps connect homeless people to things like housing services, mental health help, and substance abuse treatment. Damian says the collaborative and the outreach grid have been vital in connecting the homeless to the appropriate resources.
It's important to have police support and have the social worker together, because it's us that are engaging these individuals, and they're there to not only protect us, but protect the individual and the client themselves. This is probably the first time we see that, where cities and law enforcement are working together to try to tackle homelessness in Northern Orange County. It does have a big impact overall. A lot of people that are experiencing homelessness on the street, they have some trauma. So trauma leads into mental health. So it's all connected, and sometimes while they're on the street, they lean towards substances because it's a difficult situation, and sometimes people have the history of substance use already with them. So it goes hand in hand. So it's a good way that we stay connected and kind of not monitor, but keep track of where the individual's been, so we could locate them if they need more services or follow up with them at any point in time.
I've been a police chief for 11 years now, and this is probably my most rewarding program that I've ever been involved in.
And joining me now to discuss all this further and to answer some tough questions is Democrat California State Senator Josh Newman. Senator Newman represents North Orange County. The senator collaborated with law enforcement, community-based organizations, and social workers to develop the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative. Senator Newman, thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, David.
Now, I hope you're not going to be immodest in your answer. I did some research, Senator Newman. You helped get the initial $20 million grant that provided 4 years of funding. If I'm not mistaken, you're trying to get this program to more cities in Orange County, possibly even replicate it throughout California, which could be amazing. How exactly did this North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative begin? You really were the origin of this. I did research that. Talk about, though, your personal campaign to begin with this, why this was a signature issue of yours, but even more so, how has homeless affected you personally and on an emotional level? Because thus you're trying to obviously help solve the homeless crisis in Orange County. Go ahead.
So appreciate it. Let me start with kind of the origins of the collaborative. In 2017, shortly after my first election, I had a group of law enforcement officers and city managers from cities in my district who came to my office for a meeting, and they had what started as, I think, some good observations that turned into what I think has proven to be a really good idea. And their observation was that as small cities, they were really inherently limited as to what they could do to address in any kind of impactful way, the three problems, but primarily homelessness, and then youth violence, and then post-incarceration reentry challenges, which people coming out of prison, coming back into communities. But especially on homelessness, where the cities have limited resources, but probably more importantly, the community of unhoused people don't really have a particular reason to worry about where they wake up in the morning, where they go to sleep at night, and where they spend their time. And so what we've seen over the years is a lot of money and effort expended without a lot of results. And so the idea that came out of this was the notion of a regional effort to address the root causes of homelessness and youth violence and post-incarceration challenges. And I took that idea, right? The only thing I can really take credit for is knowing a good idea when I hear it, and went up, came back up to Sacramento, and during the 2017 budget cycle, lobbied for sufficient funds to stand up a program that is now, as you mentioned, in its 5th year, going into its 6th year, which started with 8 cities, now includes 11 cities across the North Orange County area. And what it has done is it's helped align the efforts of not only the region, right, cities working with other cities, but within cities, it is connected law enforcement to community-based organizations that are now working in a more coordinated fashion on finding solutions to these problems.
Senator, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't this project originally known as the North Orange County Public Safety Task Force? Why the change of the name from Task Force to Collaborative? What was wrong with Task Force? Now, I preface that by saying I've done a gazillion homeless stories, talked to all the activists, all the advocates over the years. Somehow they insist homelessness is criminalized here in California. Was any of that stigma going on here with the name change, Senator?
No, it's an interesting question. So the name change, I guess I can take credit for two things. I got the funds for this good idea, but it was my idea, I think my insight, to change the name. And the observation was, over 4 years, we were seeing a substantial amount of success, but just in terms of naming terminology, when you call something a task force, there's, I think, a presumption that a task force is typically something where you get a bunch of people together and you kind of ruminate over a problem, and then you come out with some recommendations, and somebody else is generally expected to implement or act on those recommendations. We were actually, we being the 11 cities, were making progress, right? But I think when people heard it was a task force, they always assumed it was still in the planning phase. And so, as of kind of the most recent cycle, we made that name change. I think to make clear to people that this is an ongoing and very promising effort, and it is characterized by a substantial amount of collaboration that is the key to its success. Now, from to your other question, sort of within the area earlier, every one of the cities in Northern Orange County, like virtually every city in the state, faces challenges around homelessness. And it has gotten to the point where, it's like the weather, right? There's that joke about the weather, that everybody gripes about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. We all have complaints, and I think, smart observation about homelessness, but the alignment, right? The coordination is often what's missing. And so, that again, that's what I was hoping for, is if we could get all of these cities that faced similar problems, and all of these organizations, including public safety, that were working, but often kind of in silos, not knowing what the others were doing, not having a basis for collaboration. If we could solve for that, then we'd make some progress. And the keys really to the success are there are two people, or actually three if you think about it. So the executive director of the task force, now called the Collaborative, is a wonderful woman named Sue Kang. And I'm sure you'll have interviewed her for some of these stories.
Yes.
And she is on loan, technically, from the city of Stanton. And she's the administrator for the project and has done a terrific job inviting partners, doing the RFP, making grants, and otherwise making sure that everybody works together. The other two people, it's one position, is the lead of law enforcement participant in the agency. It was originally the chief of police of Buena Park, Corey Sinez, who recently retired. He's now been replaced by the chief of police of Fullerton, a guy named Bob Dunn, who is, both of them are providing a really important level of leadership, both within the public safety community, but just importantly, like across communities to the community-based organizations with whom they're working. And, they had not worked with a lot of these organizations before. And the real silver lining to this is they have not had to arrest homeless people. One of the things that the Collaborative has allowed is that, we can direct services in an appropriate way to people in need without it getting to the point of arrests, without, public safety officers having to, essentially, solve the problem on their own, which tends not to work. And again, it's so far so good. We're going into year 6, and this is not only working well for our region, it offers real promise as a model to replicate in other areas.
Senator, take no offense to this next question, because I promise this is not directed at you. The work you're doing is amazing. Props to you and your folks on this program. We've been out there. It's good work. Unfortunately, I cannot censor myself, and that's my problem. When there are so many homeless projects and plans that, this all too well, been all talk, no action due to worthless political leaders. And I'm not walking that back. I am saying worthless political leaders. They all promise, Senator, they're going to solve the homeless crisis. The epidemic gets worse and worse. I mean, here in Los Angeles, the city got, what was it, $100 million a year for 10 years, $1 billion. The homeless crisis in Los Angeles is off the charts, worse and worse. It's terrible. With that said, you do have a great project, and so I want you to tell our viewers more about the true value of your project. You get what I'm saying with that?
Yeah. So I won't disagree with you. On kind of on balance, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's why people are so frustrated with the status quo and why they're so skeptical of promises made at this point, because it is absolutely true that we have spent literally billions and billions of dollars in this state over just the last decade. And even as we've done so, the problem is clearly getting worse. And you don't need statistics. All you have to do is spend time in your own communities to know that. And so I won't argue that, my city of Fullerton is the same as the city of LA. It's obviously much smaller and in some ways more manageable. But the key, I think, to making progress is, I guess, two things. One is knowing what you don't know, right? And so, easy to kind of sloganeer. But, it's important to remember when we talk about homelessness is not one thing, right? It's sort of the aggregation of lots of things that combined together leave people unhoused, right? And these things are complicated, incredibly challenging. So they run the gamut from mental health, substance abuse, domestic violence, economic displacement. So all of these things need to be addressed on their own terms. And when we're just talking about homelessness, that kind of misses the point. And so what my model, right, what the Orange County model allows for is it deliberately allowed for us to first get together all interested parties in our area who wanted to work collaboratively on this. And that was kind of self-sorting. If they volunteered to do it, they were both indicating a willingness to partner with other agencies, but also I think an acknowledgement of what you said, which is, just having hundreds of different organizations doing the same thing isn't necessarily a recipe for success. In many cases, it's the opposite. They wind up competing with each other and almost having a vested interest in the perpetuation of the problem, because, that's the basis of their businesses, if you're honest. And so what we try to do with the grant monies, right, $20 million over 4 years, last year was $7.8 million, use those funds to better align people, use those funds to better introduce organizations that had a common interest and force them gently to collaborate and hold them accountable with real data. And one of the best most encouraging data points is we've gotten over the last 5 years almost 5,000 people off the streets, and on a proportionate basis in my area, that's a huge improvement.
It is a huge improvement. We have about 2 minutes left in this segment. And here's a question I have for you, the final question, and then I want you to get the last word in about any final message you want to tell our audience. With all that you said, why do you believe there has been, let's say, such a lack of political conviction, political determination with your colleagues, your peers, let's say at the state capitol, to try and find a way to battle against the disastrous homeless crisis in California? Why is that? What's going on, Senator?
I think, David, that comes back down to kind of that general notion of knowing what you don't know. And, this state's massive, right? And, 40 million people, but probably just importantly, over 480 cities in California. And not every city is the same, but every city is facing to some degree the same challenges. And it's really hard, to find solutions or to dictate solutions from Sacramento in kind of a one-size-fits-all fashion, right? We do one thing well, which is spend money. One thing we don't do well is look at data, work at the local level, and devise real problems based on sort of trial and error. And that's what we have done in the North Orange County area with this collaborative. And again, if you apply that, multiply it, and apply it across the state, you start to make real progress. Do it top down from Sacramento, doesn't seem to work very well.
Senator, I want to give you the final word. What should we know about you, this homeless project, or homelessness, as it were?
So these are solvable problems, but problems plural. There is no single problem, as I mentioned, called homelessness. There's a whole array of problems that come together to contribute to people finding themselves homeless for different reasons. So, we should be smarter about addressing the causes of homelessness and the true needs of homeless people. The one thing I do want to mention that I am particularly proud of on behalf of the folks who do this work is we have taken homelessness in the Orange County area and taken it from an abstraction, right, calling it homelessness and saying there's X number of people, and brought it to a human level. So everybody who's participating in these programs is a known person. We know who they are. They've signed up to be sort of receive services and have their records as part of a central database. And because of that, we treat them as people. And when you solve people's problems, if you solve enough people's problems, you can solve homelessness. If you simply think, there's a disease or a phenomenon called homelessness and we're going to throw some money at it, it's not going to work.
California State Senator Josh Newman, thank you so much for a great interview. So greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me.